We can start. Hi, everyone. I'm Guna Nadarajan. I'm the Dean of the STEM School of Art and Design. Welcome to our Creative Trajectories panel. In my job, I've met hundreds of our alums all across the country, in fact, in different parts of the world. And one thing that comes up again and again, for me at least, is, and it strikes me and impresses on me, the kind of exciting work that we are doing at the art school, is that all the different pathways that our alums have taken. Every year, when I meet with new students, and usually there are parents coming along with them. And usually what happens is that the parents will have a worried look in their faces, of course. And the questions that they have are typically almost always a variation of the same, which is, and it's always with a worried look. My son or my daughter is planning to study in the school or is enrolled in the school. I'm really worried. What will they do after they graduate? And it's a regular question, and it's an important question definitely for them as parents to have, and for young people who are trusting their careers with us to have. And I must say, I've been doing this for 27 years, and I used to know how to respond to parents. Meaning, I used to be able to say, well, they will usually do this, they will usually do that, and there will be a list of about 5 or 6 or maybe 10 different things I could list. It's become increasingly difficult for me to list all the different directions our alums, our graduates take. And part of it is testimony to the program that we are, and part of it is to an indication of the changing labor market and the changing creative economy that we are inhabiting. An economy that actually is constantly talking about the need for creative individuals, people who are thinking broader, people who are thinking deeper, people who are thinking critically, and people who are thinking creatively. Always looking at the world with a very different lens altogether. We are proud to produce those graduates. And I can tell you that, and if these alums of ours would testify to the different directions that I'm talking about. This panel is really our way of sharing with you the exciting, sometimes untoward, surprising trajectories that our alums have taken. Each of these individuals, as they list what they have done and where they have gone to since graduation, you would see the exciting opportunities that are available for those who embrace art and design. So thank you again for coming. I am very glad that today's panel is going to be moderated by Jane Prophet. Dr. Jane Prophet is the Associate Dean for Research, Creative Work, and Strategic Initiatives at the STEM School. She just joined us in July, actually, and most recently she was a professor in Goldsmiths University in London, and prior to that she was Associate Dean at the City University of Hong Kong in the School of Creative Media. So you are in good hands, and it's going to be an exciting panel. Thank you very much for coming. Jane, take it away.
Thank you, Gunnar. So it's great to be here this afternoon and have such a wonderful audience. We might leave the house lights up a little higher, if you don't mind, just so that people can make notes. Thank you so much. It's wonderful for me. I've already met quite a few alum, but it's fantastic to have the opportunity to listen to the stories that this particular group are going to tell you about, because we're going to hear their various and non-linear journeys from their experience as students at Stamps to where they are now in their professional lives. And I'd like to just start by saying it wasn't difficult to find such an eclectic mix of people that had such a wide range of skills. I think that we're delighted that they're here because of their particular innovative visions and journeys, but also because they do, in many ways, represent quite realistically the kind of journeys and career paths of many of the stamps community. So rather than me introduce them, they're going to introduce themselves, and we're going to start with you, Darren Wolfberg, BFA 1998.
Thank you.
Welcome.
So thank you, Dean, and thank you, Jane. The path that I took was kind of a unique and winding path. I graduated in 1998. I went to Sony as a product designer, and then was quickly brought into product development and technology, iterating around the dot-com days, new technologies that were coming out. And from there, I was moved to the venture capital group, where I was an analyst for different technologies and how they would fit within the different operating companies at Sony. So it was more of a strategic role. I then left to start a software company that was venture-backed. It was taking the functionality of a PC and making it web-based, so whether you're at home, at school, your friend's house, or the library, you can access your information and applications from anywhere. This was back in 1999. We had great success. I then went to business school at University of Chicago, and then got into finance. And today I am COO of a broker-dealer. I'm also head of fintech for that broker-dealer, heavily involved in big data and also blockchain, which are at the forefronts of disruption in finance today. And I think, what I think back to going to the University of Michigan and being at the School of Art and Design, it's really the concept of strategic thinking, problem solving, and there's a process that you learn in art school. And I think that process transcends through any career path, any sector, or any vertical. So as a parent, rest assured your kids are in safe hands.
Thank you so much, Darren. And Marguerite Aiken, you graduated with your BFA in 1988, and then you did your MFA too, which is great, 1991. Can you tell us a little bit about your current work and your journey?
So like you, Darren, my pathway was maybe more arty. So my undergraduate was in design. I knew from the beginning I wanted to be a medical illustrator. I stayed to 91, finished the degree here, moved to Chicago. I had a job at the Anatomical Chart Company. So if you go to your doctor's office and you see the wall charts, I can still see mine in advertisements or various places in the world where they post them. And I still see my artwork there, which is kind of exciting. I worked, I loved it, but I got the bug in graduate school in anatomy with the medical students that perhaps I wasn't in the right field. I was counseled with one of those pats on the back. Listen, you should just finish your degree, get a job, see how it goes. And medical school is a big decision. So I did that and got the degree, got the job, worked, liked it, was good at it, won awards. It was awesome. But I couldn't shake it. So I turned to one of my authors who I was illustrating textbooks for at the time. I left the other job full-time and started freelancing, hoping that that would achieve that need I had for more, and it was fine, but not enough, and he encouraged me to apply to medical school. So in the meantime, I met a plastic surgeon to draw for, and I went into the OR with him. This is my moment where I realized what I needed to be doing. He was harvesting cartilage from a 7-year-old boy's ribs. He was carving the pieces, sewing them together, putting them underneath the side of his head where he didn't have an ear for an ear reconstruction. And I had that eureka moment where you say, oh my gosh, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. So first day of medical school, I told my classmates I was going to be a plastic surgeon, and they had no idea. So I worked hard, got into residency, where I worked even harder, and now I'm a full-time plastic surgeon in Grand Rapids, Michigan. and I couldn't be happier. It is the best job anyone could possibly have. I get to make people happy, I get to make me happy, and it's just a really rewarding career.
Thank you. So over to you, Chelsey, Neiman Nassib. When you graduate, you were our most recent graduate, I think, 2010.
Yes.
So tell us about your exciting journey over the last few years.
Sure. So I graduated in 2010 with an MFA from Michigan, BFA, sorry. And I wanted to be a full-time artist. So I was making paintings, selling them after school to friends and friends of friends, and putting on shows and selling them through that, and felt like this might not be sustainable. So I started working for an interior designer, and we were selling my paintings to our clients, actually, because we were having a hard time sourcing artwork that was unique and affordable without having to take our clients to a proper gallery. So I had experience selling my own work, sourcing work, and my co-founder at the time was actually working for Gagosian, and she had clients who wanted to buy work, but even if they had the money, they wouldn't sell it to them. So we felt like there was a big need and a big opportunity in the market to connect emerging artists and people who wanted to buy artwork without having to go to a brick and mortar gallery. So we started with a proof of concept. We thought, okay, the art world is saying that they won't go online. And we thought, I think artists will. So we contacted our friends who had graduated art school and our friends and friends of friends, got them to give us their work, and we launched an online art gallery. So today, 6 years later, we have a company called Tapin Collective, and we sell artwork by emerging artists.
Great. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Pete, over to you, Peter Baker. You've from a company that's been in the news a lot locally lately. Please tell us your story since you graduated MFA 1991.
2000.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Don't
2000,
mind
I'm
the
sorry.
gray in the beard. Yeah, sometimes I feel that way. But so I actually started out in architecture for the first half of my undergrad, and realized pretty quickly that design and photography both were much more quickly satisfying and much more self-sufficient. I could sort of do my own designs, do my own photography, sort of do the whole stack of things pretty much on my own, which was really sort of how most of my career went. I left U of M and worked at Borders corporate for a while, working on Borders.com. At U of M, in the design school, there wasn't really a web track yet. Web programming, web development was mostly in the engineering school, but I knew that was something I was really interested in and sort of taught myself, and that's really where a lot of my career led after that, incorporating design and technology. So worked at Borders for a while on Borders.com before that all blew up. Managed to leave before that all blew up and went to Chicago and got a string of different design jobs. I went out there with nothing planned, nothing to do, and it showed for the first few months. Ended up working for a guy out of his basement that was selling foam interlocking flooring that would only allow me to use Impact, the typeface, on his website, which should give you chills. Went from there to Blue Cross Blue Shield for about 6 weeks. Might indicate how fun that one was. And then really from there got hooked up with a few other people who were trying to get a startup going. This was kind of before startups was such a known term. And so we built a company called Catalyst that is still going. They're still plugging away. It's a commercial real estate listing website that other firms can use as sort of their back end. And that was, I mean, there was 4 of us at the time, and that was really, I got to basically do everything for a small company, from logo and branding and marketing to the website and the front-end production of the website, photography for the company. We were, shooting on spec some of the commercial buildings, so I would go and do that. So I really got to use sort of everything, and as well as learn a lot more, especially on the business side, because it was just like 4 of us literally in a closet for the first year, sort of trying to figure out how to build a business. So I was there for 3 or 4 years, and then followed a girl out to California, who's now my wife, so yay. And that's when I really decided, while I was in Chicago, I'd started doing a lot more photography on the side, album covers and things like that, things that I could do. I could incorporate my own photography into the designs I was asked to make for people, especially bands and book covers and things like that. And decided when I went out to California, I was just going to go entirely freelance. And any one of these things that I did was really tough to make a full-time freelance career out of. So I kind of did them all. I did a lot of photography for a lot of different magazines. I built websites. I did Tesla Motors' first website before that was really a big deal. Elon doesn't know who I am, don't worry. And so just a lot of that, really scraping together a decent career out there. Did Cliff Bar's website and a lot of their branding, did photography for Herman Miller and a few other magazines, Rolling Stone and Business Week, and really just injected myself anywhere that I could sort of be useful. After that, we moved to Ann Arbor. I'm from Michigan originally, so parents, you can get your kids to move home at some point. We moved back here, started a family. I kept freelancing, and one of the crews that I freelanced for was 2 guys starting a cybersecurity company called, it wasn't called anything at the time, I got to name the company for them, called Duo. And that was about 7-8 years ago. Grew the company from half dozen people early on to 750 in the last 7 years. And recently sold the company to Cisco for $2.5 billion. And in that time, got to build really, I'm a little biased, but a world-class internal design, writing, videography, and basically agency internally at Duo, which even our CEO would credit with a lot of our growth and our ability to sort of resonate with our audience. So that's been really fun.
Which is kind of ironic, because you started by saying how much you loved the fact that in photography you could work on your own.
Yeah, I loved working alone,
Yeah.
and now I can't do it. Now I got a bunch of them here right now, and I can't do anything on my own anymore.
They're just people
They are my
are
crutch.
following you around. Yeah, but I mean, I think probably this is an experience that maybe each of you could, or a couple of you could speak to a bit more. What was it like going from, your final year at college, when now if you're in your final year at Stamps, you get your own studio space, or you're doing your own thing, you're thinking about your final show. What was it like going from that to being in your first job, even if you're only there for 6 weeks?
I would say that going from Stamps to your first job was a bit eye-opening. I think that you're taught a process and how to implement and how to ideate through designs, but there are so many other factors that become factors that you need to consider when you're working and when you're living out on your own, and when you have to pay rent. I did have help when I was at school, so. So I think that there are so many things that students can better prepare themselves for, doing taxes, doing insurance. But at the end of the day, one of the best pieces of advice that I learned early on is figure out what keeps your boss up at night. And if you can figure that out and help solve for that, then you'll have a job. And that's kind of, as you go through your career and you try to make an impact and differentiate yourself, that always has stuck with me as one of those things that that you always try to solve for. And if it's, well, who's my next consumer, then you got to solve for what is the product that you're going to make that the next consumer is going to want. So I think that's.
I completely agree with that. I think one important thing that you think about when you transition as a undergraduate to a job or graduate school and then a job is to think about the brand that you are and what you're making for yourself today, especially in light of the technology that's available. So as an employer of about 50 people in a business, I look at everything on everybody that I hire. Doesn't matter if you're doing art for me or if you're doing marketing or if you're my scrub tech in my OR. I want to know everything about you. I'm going to look you up. I'm going to find out what you did on your page or whatever you're using. And so you're your own brand from now to the future. So make it what you want it to be, because it's going to stick with you for a very long time. And your employers are going to know, your parents are going to know. Don't show anything your parents wouldn't be proud of. And start today.
When I graduated, I wanted to be a full-time artist. So that was really hard because what do you do? You're going to just graduate school and be discovered, be in a group show? No. So I think what's important looking back is, besides the obvious of working really hard, is knowing what you're good at. So whatever job you do go into, everybody's working really, really hard, but everybody's also unique, and everybody does have something that somebody else doesn't have. Figure out what that is and what you have to offer. When I graduated and was working for the interior designer, there was nobody on the team who could negotiate contracts. And I was like, I graduated art school, right? Like, I don't know how to negotiate with this kitchen engineer. But you do it and you grow. So I think that was really had a lot of growth, and yeah.
Going one at a time, okay. So when I left school, I felt very theoretically capable and very practically lost. The first few jobs I got were, figure out how to print 300 of this thing and rip it to whatever. And it was like, we didn't do that. We had a copy services that we could just hand a zip disk over, and suddenly we get a stack of stuff back that looks great. Things like that, even things when I was doing photography and exhibiting in galleries, being able to package art, being able to, just the mechanics of what it takes to kind of do this stuff beyond the creation of the work itself. I really felt like I did not get the sort of tradescraft from U of M, but what I realized much later was like, those kind of things change constantly. Mediums change, technology changes. Those kind of applicable skills are not long for their usefulness, but the theoretical skills, the ability to think in a different way, an abstract way about a problem, that is by far the most useful thing I got out of art school. And it sometimes has very little to do with pen on paper or imagery or anything like that. It really is sort of breaking a problem down into component pieces and thinking about it a different way and non-linearly. And that kind of applies itself to anything you want to do later. So.
When we were talking earlier, one of the things that the five of us were talking about was this sense of adaptability, and the fact that at art school, you never know what's going to be thrown at you next by the faculty, do you? What are they going to, what scheme, what plan, what challenge are they going to ask you to solve? And to use what we're always talking about, critical thinking and creative thinking. And I actually wanted to start by asking you, Marguerite, because knowing that you'd worked in illustration, in medical illustration, I wondered if you could talk a little bit about that because for you, you were moving from working in 2 dimensions to working in 3 dimensions with this sort of sense of sculpting and the 3D form of the human body. And I wondered if you could just talk a bit about those transferable skills and how that worked for you.
My time at Stamps, which wasn't named Stamps then, but it's lovely now, I love it. It's, I was going into medical illustration. I had a life drawing class every single semester that I was here. It was just one life drawing class after another, and I thought, I know I need to do this, and so it was every day. We talked earlier about the group critique, and we'll come back to that one. But then I felt like as an illustrator, medical illustrator in Chicago, I really did work in 2D. I had very 3-dimensional mind. I would read editorial pieces and conceive images to go along with them. It was just like a project that I might have done in school. I illustrated textbooks, and then I would read OR transcripts, and I would conceive the position. Sometimes I'd go in the OR, that was not a big deal, but most of the time I could do the drawing without being in the OR, based on the description from the surgeon and classic approaches that I was taught or learning. I was learning orthopedic surgery. I illustrated for a pediatric orthopedic surgeon who was very prolific and who was the one who helped me realize what I really wanted to do. What I didn't like was working alone. I realized I like to produce art. I like to produce my pieces. I outgrew myself. I didn't have enough time to do the work I needed to do. I realized I would probably have to hire someone. I didn't want to be a boss. I never really wanted to be a boss. That wasn't part of what my future goal was. So know if you like working alone, or if you want to work with people, or if you want to be an independent person and produce individual art pieces, or if you just want to apply that theoretic stuff that we learn somewhere else. The theory is amazing. I've now been to a lot of different colleges, and they all teach differently, and I didn't appreciate that when I was here at U of M, but I do now in hindsight. I see that they do teach us how to think about stuff and how to problem solve, and it's not, there's no straight line to that answer. There's a lot of waves around it, and that's the most important thing I think we can take home.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Darren, I wondered if you could talk a bit about that, especially, you moved from industrial design through to the work that you do now, working with big teams, and I wondered what your experience at college had been, at art school. Did you work in teams, and did that prepare you, or was it just completely different?
So I think we worked in teams in art school. I think the one thing you can rely on in art school is that every semester there is a new curveball that's thrown at you by the faculty. 1 year we're designing, and mind you, I was 20 years old at the time, but we're designing products for moms that just had babies. Then we go to designing products for Hummer. Then we go to designing products for Whirlpool. And you're going through all these different sectors of consumer products, and you have to start all over again. You have to start understanding the industry, understanding consumer behavior, understanding design aesthetic. And each semester you're like, it's like you watch those cooking shows, and you have that like box you open up, and like, these are the 3 ingredients you got to cook with. That's what it's like, which is great, but at the same time, it's a huge challenge, and you have to do a lot of work. And how that's kind of helped me through my career, having a startup, and constantly, if anyone has ever done a startup, there is always a problem to solve. There's always a fire to put out. There's always resourcefulness that's required. And today, working for a company and being the COO for a company of 80 people, there's always a problem. There's always a fire that needs to be put out. There's always someone you're trying to hire, and the person negotiating it, blew up the conversation. So it's always a changing atmosphere. And in finance, every day is a new day in the market. I'm able to take a lot of the visual skills that I learned at the art school and apply it to technical research. And I've regular conversations with very successful people and they want to know what I think, and it's only because I can visualize things that no one else on Wall Street can.
Chelsey, how about your experience? And you're working directly, almost directly, with artists and images. And I don't know if you're still practicing as an artist, but what's it like for you working with artists in that way on a kind of weekly basis or daily basis?
Sure. Yeah, I think one of the greatest skills I took away was one of my favorites were the critiques. Actually,
Are we talking about that?
I don't know. Yeah, look, and I think that's what's so great. So on this panel, I might be the only one who loved them.
Why don't you describe the critique for people in the audience that have never had one or been part of one before?
Sure.
Give us your take on the critique.
Sure. So the assignment the curveball comes, the assignment's given, and you're to come back with a painting, with a design, with a drawing, whatever it is, and the whole class and professors sit around and we talk about how good it is, how bad it is, and why it's so bad. And it gives you, one, a taste of what's real, how are other people perceiving your work, what did you not see as you were producing your work. You learn how to take criticism, you learn how to defend your work. What else? I mean, I remember my first critique, I had a big red line going through my painting. And they were like, well, what does that represent? Nothing. It looks good. It's meant to be there. It's part of my flow, And could I stand behind my work? Could I defend it? And if I couldn't, then I wasn't maybe doing what I was meant to be doing. And it pushes you and it makes you question yourself. And I think all of that is really, really important. In my job today, I'm constantly looking at artwork and judging it. Do I like it? Do I not like it? What makes it good to me? Does it have artistic integrity? Is it unique? Have I seen it a million times before? Is this person really expressing who they are through their work, saying something about who they are? And those are skills that you could only get in that room. So that is the basis. I mean, the beginning of my job, at least. So.
Great. Yeah. I don't know if I dared go here, Pete, but would you like to share with us your experience of a critique?
I loved critiques. I loved having them. I loved being critiqued, and I loved critiquing. I've got a bunch of coworkers here that can probably attest I'm a born critic. But really, I mean, the best thing I got out of art school was the ability to take criticism, by far. To be able to separate yourself from your idea. One of the teachers I had, who was still a practicing designer and just taught one or two classes, he was the most ruthless professor we had. But he would demolish people's work, but in a way that did not demolish them. And part of it is more around how graphic design and communication design and stuff like that lends itself to it. But really, all artwork, all written word, there's something you're trying to communicate in it. And if you know what it is you're trying to communicate, then you can probably agree on whether or not it is being communicated. So if I'm designing a poster for a band, what are a couple of the things that somebody needs to take away from it? What band it is, when it is, and where it is. Did it say those things? If it didn't, this piece was a failure. And there's nuance to all that, but like being able to think objectively about the success or failure of your work, whether it's fine art, commercial art, or something altogether different. That really is the biggest thing you can take. That's the biggest point of a group critique is, you are not your idea. You're here to do something, and if you agreed on what that thing is, then hopefully you can agree or disagree on whether it did that, whether it was a success. And being able to not take those things personally is super important as you go throughout your career. To be able to be told, like, I don't get it, and not have it just dismantle your attitude for the day. Like, that's super important. And being able to speak with candor about why we're doing something, being able to justify why you did something. Like, why is the red line on there? Was that a conscious decision, or did you accidentally hit it with the brush? Being able to justify your work, talk about your work, take the criticism about your work, that's bar none the most important thing to take from art school.
Yeah, and I love the fact that you've really drew attention to separating yourself from the work in that moment as much as is possible. And I guess I wonder how you might respond to that as well. I mean, one of the things that I think that art students and design students tend to become very good at, and then when they move into early career, is actually experiencing failure. All those exhibitions you apply for, or all those design competitions you enter that you don't get through, and you pick yourself up and you keep going. And so I wondered if you might talk a bit about the critique and that sense of have you succeeded or not.
So I thought that the critiques were a mechanism to communicate, and whether you're communicating the visual art or you're explaining yourself, I think communication is one of those key things that transcends whatever you may do. So if it is explaining the art next to you, or if it is trying to bounce back from a failed project, communication and how you kind of walk your way from failure to the next chapter are very important things. I think that critique is a stepping stone as well. It is a way for you to learn critically, and also kind of put you up against the rest of your class. And what did you do well? What didn't you do well? And what do you need to improve on? And how that kind of, took me to, in my career is you're always facing critique, as Peter said. And the more you can bounce back from it, and the more you can brush it off, problems only get bigger as you get older. So, you got to start building that skin, and art school is a great way to do it.
Can I add one more thing? Like I said, I love critiques. The flip side of it is learning how to give a critique without being an asshole. Like, you've got to find a way to, again, objectively talk about somebody's work without them being the point of the work. And, that's just as important as being able to take it, is being able to give it in a constructive way that's not tying it to the emotional aspect of somebody just poured some amount of time into this thing.
Yeah, compassionate critique, yeah.
And that's a skill that I think, as somebody who employs people, is not just about work and design, it's also about people. And how you learn to just communicate, that's a communication skill. So
I totally agree with that. I hated the critiques. Maybe I was too immature and undergraduate, but I was very nerve-wracked about it and felt very personal, and it was very difficult to separate yourself from your pieces, as it was the first time you sold a piece, to give it up, and that was really hard. But after a while, with maturity, with age, and lots of experience, you do figure out how to overcome that discussion you have to have with your friend who's not wearing the right clothes, or the piece that isn't quite hitting the mark, and you need more out of that employee because it needs to be right. You draw on those days back in the critique, and you think, I know it felt good to me and what didn't feel good to me, and you don't use those words, and you figure out how to say that stuff to your employees or your partners or your wife or your husband, whomever it is.
Right.
Thank you. It's also a great muscle to practice, because when you're looking at a business problem or any problem in any way, and you first have to understand why it's not working. So you're doing that, whether it's a piece, a design, and being able to differentiate between I don't like this and understand, well, what's not working about it, whatever it is that you're talking about. That's a very transferable skill. So,
and I think it's very easy to critique and just go straight at them, straight line, this is what's wrong, okay? But it's almost, you want to be dyslexic about the delivery. So you almost need to break down the message into, well, what is the right way for them to absorb this as opposed to instant deflection? So I think that's something else that you kind of learn in this process.
So we thought we might pause a couple of times as we go through and just see if anyone had questions that have bubbled up during this first part of the talk. We're just going to send you the microphone so we can hear you.
We actually have a mechanism for this. Can you hear me through this? Hello? Yeah, keep going. All right, there we go. So this is what we're using for our Q&A, and it's a bit interactive. You need to toss it to each other, okay?
And you need to speak fairly loudly.
You just speak into this black part right here.
Good catch.
Hopefully more of them tomorrow.
I'm Mike Flood. I live in La Jolla, California, and I'm a business school grad, undergrad and graduate school, and of course we're all about recruiting, right? So the question I get asked by students that I'm recruiting to Michigan as freshmen, and I've recruited about 400 from San Diego County to Michigan over a long period. The question I get from them and their parents is, well, if you as an alum of Stamps were recruiting on campus, would you recruit at Stamps? And why? What would you look for in a potential employee that would make you come to Stamps to look for that employee?
I'll take a stab. I actually think Stamps and University of Michigan are phenomenal places to go if you want to be employed. And the reason for that, Michigan is a nucleus of medical research, engineering research, a phenomenal business school, a great information sciences division, and we were talking about this earlier, how they all say that, well, they have design in their curriculum, and I've worked with those designers that have MBAs, and I'm also an MBA. They don't have design. They know how to make a white box and put some lines in it, but we were talking about culture, and how do you make the experience of a consumer a consistent culture, not only in the design of the product, but in the design of the message, in the culture of the firm, and very much design is at the center of that. And I think that coming to Stamps, you learn, because you're working with some of these other curriculums, how to solve not just a design problem, but critical thinking of different concepts that extend beyond what a packaging is. But where is the consumer going to be in 3 years? Because that's what you're designing your product for. So I actually think it's a very easy sell. And I think a Stamps student is prepared for a lot of corporations that need this skill set.
I would reiterate what I said earlier in that the school teaches you how to think, how to ask the right questions, because you don't just get an answer. You have to ask and massage the question to a point that all of the right answers come to the forefront. And this school taught me that. The Stamp School, the University of Michigan, I took a lot of different classes because I had to take all those science classes too. And it wasn't just, A equals B, B equals B. It was a roundabout trip. But I would recommend that you tell them that Michigan's going to give you the best experience, the best education, and the best opportunities after graduation?
I think the caliber of resources available and the willingness of the professors to tailor unique experiences for students who take the initiative, that was huge for me at least. I did abroad twice, and I built my own curriculum because I had so much support and willingness in the faculty to go after that. But as an employer, Michigan is an incredible school, and you always look at the school, but also and this is for the students, what did you do with it? What opportunities did you take advantage of? The school can only do so much. What internships did you take? What classes did you take? The school is incredible and has all the resources available, but ultimately it's up to the student in any situation.
Yeah, so we have recruited from the SAM school. We've recruited heavily from U of M in general. That's frankly a lot of why Duo is in Ann Arbor, is to tap that faucet of talent, especially on the engineering side. But when I switched into the art school, I actually thought a little bit that, should I be at something like SCAD or Parsons or more of a traditional art school, pure art school? I'm in this, lesser known art department within a well-known engineering business and medical university. But really, ultimately, I think that's probably one of the biggest strengths, is the multidisciplinary aspect of U of M. My roommates in college, not one of them was an art student. I had engineers, I had business majors, a lot of engineers. Made the bill separating really particular, but that kind of thing, like especially in design later on, being able to interact and interface and understand the other areas of a business that you're going to be confronted with, and sort of not treating, there's a reason, monodisciplinary is not a phrase, multidisciplinary. There is no monodiscipline anymore. We all work on multiple aspects of everything we do. Even if we're gonna be, pure fine artists on our own solo career forever, we're business owners. And there are other aspects of that you may not get out of a sort of pure art school. And so I think what I initially thought was sort of a weakness of U of M is maybe one of its bigger strengths, the overlap of disciplines here and the creative collisions that happen from that.
One more. Thank you. The most successful and innovative companies today are design driven. That's a really important thing to note. So if you're in this room and you're in school, you're in a really powerful position to be at a very important part of any company that you're at. So,
thank you. Any other questions? Yes, over there, and then there's one at the back afterwards.
Hi. So I came in a little late, so I missed names, but I have a question for a specific panelist. I'm currently interviewing for med schools, but I like to think of myself as a very artsy person, so I'm kind of curious about your journey to medical school. Did you know from the beginning, like, what made you pursue medical school?
I'll just make it short. I knew I'd be an artist my whole life. I was told by my worried parents that I might be interested in medical illustration because I loved science. So a high school biology teacher said, hey, this is what this is about. Michigan had a program. I came here as an undergraduate, studied design, knew I was going to go into medical illustration, worked for a bunch of years in Chicago where I just didn't get quite enough out of it, applied to medical school there. And in the meantime, I had met a plastic surgeon and who showed me what was available in an artistic fashion through medicine. So then I finished and did plastic surgery residency training, which really teaches you about how not to take things personally. Like you want to critique. That's bad. It's like 110 hours a week of awfulness. So, yeah, good luck. Does it answer your question about my windy path? It was very short.
Thank you. And there's a question right at the back. I don't know if you can throw it that far. It might have to bounce on the way. Oh.
Because we were just talking about like critiques, and that kind of made me think of like how you guys are all communicating with either your clients or your employees. And I was wondering if you could each give like a specific example or aspect of how you talk to someone, you know, about your vision, but it still stays true to you and you don't sound like someone you're not, I guess. That makes sense.
I'll go first. I got in trouble when I started work. I was not very skilled at communicating to my staff about what I needed them to do. I had been in residency for a long time, and they were taking an affront by me trying to help them understand what I thought they wanted to know when I realized they really didn't want to know. They just wanted to do their job. That did not occur to me, and it took me a long time to figure out they just want to get from point A to point B. That's not me, never has been. They don't want to know all that stuff. So I had to revamp my conversations with them and think about how they were receiving the information from me and explain that, you know, we're working on this project for this patient and this is the stuff I need them to do. They wanted it to be very specific, very as detailed as it needs to be, and most of the time they don't want to know more than that. It's unfortunate. They're not U of M grads.
I think maybe why I liked critique so much, it develops a part of you as an artist you don't love to talk. That's why you're creating, right? So practicing that and being able to be super clear in your intention is the takeaway, I think. And let me know if I'm answering your question. For example, I have to build a website. My online gallery is online. I'm not designing the website. I'm not developing it. There's so much that goes into it. But how do I express my vision to the creators as a creator? And I think that's when the clarity comes in that you have to have so that you can be true to yourself and be able to translate that to whoever you're communicating to, I think was the question.
For me, I think there's various interactions that I would have. It could be one, if there's a new product that I am selling to a client or a new business line that we want to get into, I need to explain myself. And communicating clearly is core to the explanation of why you're doing it, how you're doing it, what's it going to cost to build, when do we expect to have a return on our capital. Those are all things that when you have your initial criticisms, you use those each as chapters in a book that you're learning on things that the next time you deliver something, you touch on that reason why. So I think communication, as I said, can cover a whole different range of components, and I think the critique is one of those aspects that helps you get better each time you communicate.
Yeah, it can be really tough when you're sort of in a assumed position of authority or expertise. You know, whether it's if you're running a critique, you're probably in some. It can probably be said that you're the expert in the room or something, and that can put you into a really weird role of. It's really tempting to just say, "Oh, just do it like this." You know, do it. This is how I would do it. And nobody's going to grow from that. Nobody's going to get better from it. You're just going to end up having a team of people basically produce a bunch of stuff the same way you would have done it. And I guarantee the further you get into management or business ownership, the further away you get from being good at that stuff that you just hired a bunch of people to do. So let them do that stuff, but communicating that critique in a way that is not just dictating the end result is really tough. And I mean, practically speaking, like the best way of doing it is just asking questions. You know, just constantly ask questions about the work, about why they did it that way. Do they think it's successful? And, you know, just sort of pick at their thought process and whether they're satisfied. Because I guarantee you, they're probably not fully satisfied with anything they've done. I've never been fully satisfied with anything I've ever produced. And if somebody asked me that, it'd be hard for me to say, yeah, it's done. And so you can just kind of like get at the underlying desire of a designer and an artist to just always want to make better stuff without dictating what better means. Is that kind of what you got?
Thank you. Was there somebody else at the back?
I had a question comment. I had a question comment that goes back to recruiting. I'm a stamps grad, and my son is currently in the engineering school, and I am just blown away by the career fairs that they have and the job days or whatever they call them that they have, and these recruiters come in and these kids line up for hours and they talk to Google and Tesla and all the big players are there. And we have the same kind of minds at Stamps. They're technical problem solvers, we're creative problem solvers, and I'm wondering if there's something in place at Stamps for recruiters to come on given days or weeks and recruit. And if not, should there be? Could there be?
So I'm Helmut and I'm the Association for Academic Programs at the STAMP School. And a couple things to keep in mind. First, engineering has 10,000 students. STAMPS has 600. So being able to draw people, we have to do it in a little different way. You can't simply say, I'm going to give you exposure to 10,000 students, and yeah, I'm going to be there. But what we do are things like, we have something we call career boot camp. So we bring people in for a weekend. Starts on a Thursday night, ends at the end of Saturday, where the students are directly interacting with folks like this and talking about the pathway, what are the things that you need to do in order to be appealing to various recruiters. And then we have what we call a portfolio day, where we do bring everyone from nonprofit arts organizations to Steelcase and Herman Miller to smaller companies that are in the area. So we're coming at it from multiple ways, and it doesn't always look as grand as what things look like with engineering in the Pierpont Commons. But we are doing something very similar, more directed toward what our students are doing. The other thing I'd say is that we're getting better at interacting with some of those other schools. So the career director that we currently have has been active in talking to his peers at the other schools, so that we have a way to make sure that our students who we know would be good in some of those areas, that we can get them to those events.
Thank
And
you.
I'll just say one thing. When I was a student, I went to a lot of those events at the engineering school or at the business school to network and to meet people. And I think one of the things that we discussed was, as an art student, you have to be resourceful and you have to go to these places and have the initiative to find out and seek out what's out there, because it's better having that than not being at a school that doesn't have it. So as we said, the cross-disciplinary with the business school, the engineering school, I don't know if Michigan State has that. That was a jab, but.
So maybe let's take one more question and then we'll come back.
Talked eloquently, all of you, about somewhat circuitous route that you've taken from point A to point B. Can you speak just a little bit about the most
You need the microphone. You need the microphone. Nobody can hear you.
You've talked eloquently about the circuitous route that you've taken from point A to point B. Can you speak just a little bit about your most significant failure and how you've overcome that?
Sure. So after I left Sony, I started this company called Broadform. It was an education technology company. We were selling a product to K through 12 schools. We beat we beat out AWOLD School in Miami. We got a grant from the Annenberg Foundation. This was in 2001 at the height of the dot-com bomb. Our coup was a $60 million RFP that we were partners with AT&T and Compaq on, and that was one team, and another team was Sun Microsystems, AOL, and Sylvan Learning. September 11th happened, and they killed the bid, and we had been working a year to get this done, and we had to shut the company. I had to shut the company. And then within a 2-week span, after going to a number of funerals because I was living in New York, you gathered your pieces together, and I applied to business school, and that's how the next chapter started. But there's not, you can go back to critique and having to deal with critiques. I think there's always adversary conditions or adversity that you have to deal with. That's life. You have to channel it the right way. So.
Mine aren't quite that bad. On a smaller scale, I suppose, one of my worst memories, and this leads into a suggestion for the students out there to listen to your peers and your people who are guiding you in life, and ask questions and talk to everybody, because you never know who's going to be able to help you out there. In order to go to medical school as an undergraduate art major, I had to take a few classes. I had to go back for I had biology as an undergraduate, but chemistry, physics, and organic chemistry. And I wanted to do it and get it over with, so I was working all day and taking classes at night. Highly recommend, if you're going to go that route, that you have a lot of energy. I spoke with the dean at Northwestern of Science, where I did my medical degree later. And I said, I see you have this summer organic chemistry class. He said, it's a really bad class. I said, I'm a smart kid. I can do this class. He said, it's a year condensed into 9 weeks, one trimester in 3 weeks. It was Monday through Saturday, 8 to 12 lecture, 1 to 5 lab, Saturday morning lab in Evanston. I was living downtown. I'd take the train up, I'd do my class, I'd come back, flashcard. First day, 100 people. Second day, 30. Third day, 20. And it went kind of like that until I finished the first trimester in 3 weeks. I wasn't sure I could get through. I was visiting the professor every day after school, trying to figure it out. Anyway, long story very short, I did 2 trimesters and dropped the third prepaid and sat on my sofa and just decondensed for 3 weeks. I couldn't work, I couldn't do anything. So listen to the people who say, that's not a good class, don't take that.
I fail every day, all the time. Like, I failed as an artist. I failed with my co-founder, who's no longer with us. I fail as a manager. I fail all the time. And I think the only thing, and I'm not even where I want to be. And I think the only thing that's important is, in someone who's ultimately successful, is grit. So just getting up and doing it again and again, and not being really shot down by failure, because everybody fails. Nobody really knows everything. Nobody knows what they're doing. Top of the best companies out there, my most successful founders. Everybody is just working really hard, reading a lot, surrounding themselves with people they admire who are smart, and doing their best, but failing all the time.
Where to begin? I think that the biggest one is sort of it's a long, slow failure of basically I got complacent. I got comfortable. When I started freelancing, I had all these different kind of jobs coming in. I was talking to all these different people and doing so many different things. Websites tended to be, well-paying and pretty easy to find the work for. So I started doing more and more of those and doing less and less and less of branding work and photography work and just all the other things that sort of made me a strong designer and strong artist. And I just got really comfortable doing the work that people were asking me for rather than finding the work that I wanted to do. And so I got really used to, cranking out the same website for one customer and then kind of using something pretty similar for the next one and the next one. And I just optimized the hell out of myself to the point where I was doing fine financially, but I was bored as hell, and woke up one day and realized, like, why is everyone asking me to do the same stuff all the time? It's like, because that's all I'm showing people that I do anymore. And so that was a long, slow failure that kind of took some real, like, I had a couple shitty clients that really snapped me out of it. I was like, wait, I don't have any other options right now. This sucks. I want to do photography, but all my photo contacts have fallen off because I haven't kept in touch in the last couple of years because I got really comfortable on this little website gravy train that can go away really quickly too. So I think, like, losing that sort of hunger for variety and losing that multidisciplinary attitude of just and outreach to the kind of clients you want to work for, not the ones that are asking you for, because you're going to end up doing the same work every day because that's what people know you for, and that's what's going to be in your portfolio unless you make the effort. People don't hire you for something you've never done before, so you kind of have to do it and be able to show it and then try to get the next client that way. So I'd say that just getting sort of complacent and comfortable is the kiss of death in our world.
Thank you. So I wonder if you might share with us some memorable experience. We've had the crits, but what's something that stands out to you now when you think back to your time in the School of Art and Design? A moment with faculty, a class, with your fellow students?
I remember the all-nighters, and there were a lot of them. I don't know if it's the nature of artists, but or designers for that matter, but part of your semester project, as I said, includes research and marketing and building your product and packaging for your product, and you don't really have a full grasp of what's due until it's 2 weeks before, and you're like, you have that holy cow moment, and you're like, okay, we're going to be here for a while. And that's actually a really special time because you're in that room pulling all-nighters with everyone else in your class, and they're living there along with you, and you're sharing this, you're sharing that, whether it's a Dremel tool or the spray paint or whatever it is to get your product done, to get your presentation done, to get your boards done, or your media done in a very collegial manner and in a professional manner. And I think what was also great is, I could speak for the group that I was with. We all pushed each other, and I think about the group that I was with in industrial design. One works at Apple. And is one of the leaders for their automotive car initiatives. Another does killer architecture work in New York City, and another is in a family business designing coats. And I think what I think back to is we were all pushing each other to get better, and to I saw him do something and I was like, oh, that looks sweet, I got to do that. And it was a great environment to push one another.
And that's an easy segue. I would completely agree with that. I was in the master's program here for medical illustration, and there's only 5 students in the class. So we got to know each other over 2.5 years pretty well. And we would work those all-nighters together, and we would share ideas and do mini critiques of our own pieces next door to each other. And those late nights really teach you how to unite with people and work as a team and grow together and drive each other to get better and better. I want to add one more thing about the energy level that it takes to graduate from stamps and go out there and get that job and drive even when you're tired or doing the same thing every day. I personally am a planner. I think of myself as that, and I have a long-term goal. I know that there's going to be times where I have high energy levels and times where I have to give myself a break. So those late nights, I knew they were coming. I knew we had to do it, but I also knew that I had to take a break. And if that means like a Saturday afternoon, that's fine. Or if you have to take a summer off from school, that's fine. I had a gap year. I don't think I mentioned that, but that was really great. And my parents didn't expect it, and it came accidentally, which is strange. I just graduated earlier than I thought. I would recommend it. Boy, you get your head on straight, and you work, and you get a job, and you approach life differently when you have worked at some menial job. So the sine wave of life, that's what I call it. So work with your teams and learn from them.
I also loved the collaborative, especially my year, which I think you guys have now, is the individual studios, your senior year. That was incredible. That was like, so dreamy. Even though I never pulled all-nighters. But yeah, it was like training. But I think what was really special, only being able to look back at it, was being in critiques. And different professors at different times. So I was in a photography class, and it was time for the critique, and he looked at the photographs, and they weren't that good, and I wasn't that good, and he's, super polite, these aren't that good. But you understand what makes a good photograph. And I always remembered that. So I had taken a shitty photograph, cropped it a particular way, and he said, you understand that everything in this photograph relies on the finger at the end of whatever the crop was. And it was a moment for me where I said, oh, okay, this is something I'm good at. And I probably never thought about it, but only now can look back. And I was in a printmaking class and wasn't that good. Not that good of a printmaker. And Professor Endy, we were sitting around in a critique, and he turned around to the best printmaker, and he said, she's going to be someone you want to know in LA. She's going to be someone you want to know. And what does that mean? I was like, oh, okay, I'll remember that. I am going to be someone you want to know. And so I think over the years, like especially in school, just picking up what you're good at and understanding who you are through all your experiences, that's something that was really powerful while I was here.
Somewhat anecdotal, but Carol Jacobson, longtime stamps photo professor, I had her for I don't know, half a dozen classes, and she was phenomenal. And when I was towards the end, so like I said early on, I started out in architecture, and when I switched to the art school, I had some credits to make up, and I was reaching, it was the summer after my fourth year, and I had already planned on getting out of town, and I was like, I need a couple more credits here, and I went to Carol and asked her about a summer, I don't even know what it was called, but summer internship or student faculty learning or whatever. But she had a grant she ran the Michigan Women's Clemency Project, which was a photo project, long running, with the effort to get clemency for battered women that are in prison for fighting back, basically. And she, it was a passion project of hers, something we talked about a lot in classes. And when I talked to her about where I was at with my credit count and stuff, she said, "Well, do you want to help me with this project?" And I was like, "Yeah, but what can I do?" She's like, "Well, I need a website. I need help scanning photos." And I was like, "I can do all those things. Just tell me what you need to do." And I basically worked with her for a whole summer, doing everything I could for her. And the point of it really is asking for help when you have something to offer coming out of an arts program, I mean, you may have more practical skills than just about anyone else at your age. Everybody else is coming out of LS&A and business and engineering, and it's pretty tough to apply practically the things you learn in the engineering school directly to somebody's pet project or something. But the things that we do, I mean, we all end up being makers and producers and crafters and speakers, and we're just so capable of so many things. Offering that help and asking for help in return is probably one of the best things you can do to sort of find your next step in things. So don't hesitate to ask for access to something or advice on something, and don't hesitate to help when you have something that you can offer, because you never know what that'll do next. So I ended up with 8 credits that summer from her. So.
Thank you.
I always forget. Also, I know panels and lectures can get boring, so thank you for being here, but it's also the most inspiring place ever. Fridays at Penny Stamps lectures were so eye-opening. They were so incredible. Wow, I could do that. Wow, that could be me. So I think that was also really powerful.
And I also thought just the access to all the tools. So we didn't have 3D printing when I was starting, but 3D modeling, the wood shop, and actually making your products and making them work, invaluable.
I can also give an anecdote. I saw Janie Paul give a Penny Stamps lecture, who's no longer here, but she ran a prison arts program. And through the lecture, I was like, wow, I would love to work with her. And she held a course, and every Tuesday night, there was a group of us who would go to Jackson, Michigan, to a maximum security, all-men's prison, and teach these inmates or give them a moment of humanity, teach them, do artwork with them, and treat them like humans. And that was probably one of the most life-changing experiences I had. That's something I saw through Penny Stamps. That's something that I pursued with a professor that was here. So to your point, everything is here. Everything is available to you. It's all about what you do with it.
And we still have the Penny Stamps lectures. They're on Thursdays at 5 o'clock. Or just thereabouts, and everybody's welcome. And they continue to be absolutely inspiring. Yeah. So any of you that are free on a Thursday, please come along and get inspired. So I think we'll wrap up. We're going to open up for any final questions. But just before we do that, the last question to each of you is, what would be any final kind of takeaway point or piece of advice you'd give to people thinking of coming to Stamps or just about to graduate from Stamps about the next steps?
I mean, I think if this panel speaks to anything, it's to be flexible, to have grit, to go after what you want, and to always be reflective of yourself, and honest to yourself of who you are. Because I think the one thing that we can all say is we love what we do, and we probably wouldn't have found this happiness had it not been for time at Stamps to kind of begin that critical exploration and analysis and assessment of not just the work that you do and the medium that you like to produce, but also use those same critiquing capabilities on life. And I think Michigan prepares you for life in more ways than just in the books.
I would say my job, most of the people I work with aren't art majors. They don't really think about things the way I do. And I would say you are doing your passion now, and continue with that passion and find that as your drive. Pick a job or a field that allows you to express yourself and use that creative stuff you're made of and go in that direction. Don't be afraid to commit to it, like me. I mean, I had a little jump in the middle where I thought, maybe this isn't what's for me, but I followed the counseling I had, and I committed to it, and I worked at it, and I was good, and I liked it, but it just wasn't enough. So you can always take that left turn down the road like we all did. You don't have to. You might not need to. There are things that get in your way. There are companies closing, families that come along where you can take a break. Like I said, that sine wave of life. But commit and be all in and use your passion to be your driver, and you'll get where you want to go. But you got to be happy doing what you're doing, because otherwise it's just a job.
Okay, yeah, that's okay. I think most important is extreme ownership. So post school, it will be the first time you're not doing everything your peers are doing, and it's up to you. So read a lot, take responsibility for what you know and don't know. Your life is yours, and you get to be its author. It's an extremely exciting, but a lot of responsibility. So don't look to your parents, don't look to anybody else. Make sure you know your stuff and live your life the way you want to.
Two main thoughts. So don't expect to be discovered. You know, you might end up with 100,000 followers on Instagram, and that's cool and all. I still have 60 on Flickr, so not exactly doing a lot for me now. But you know, figure out who you're useful to and get in front of them. We're all busier than we'd like to admit. We're all more self-absorbed than certainly we'd like to admit. So nobody's out there looking for you and what you can do for them. You have to get in front of people. You have to find a way to communicate how you're useful to them, and then convince them. And that sort of brings up the second point of start considering yourself an entrepreneur. Whether you're going to go into a business and be a designer at a business, designing whatever they do, or you're going to remain a solo artist, you are a business person at the end of the day. And so if you want to remain a pure fine artist, you better figure out how to do the back office stuff so that you can keep doing the stuff that you like doing. Otherwise, you start to get squeezed out into your regular job, and everything becomes a hobby after that. So think of yourself as an entrepreneur. Figure out how to market yourself. Figure out how to talk about yourself without sounding like an asshole. All of those things are really just like how people are going to find out about you. I mean, even just practically speaking, social media is going to go away, but emails are forever. Start a mailing list. Start gathering emails from people and let them know what you're doing, what you've been up to, when you update your portfolio and stuff like that. People aren't going to revisit your website unless you tell them to. So, yeah.
Yeah. And it's all about practice. So one of the things we do at Stamps is help people practice doing that. So you don't have to come in with all those skills. We've heard you can come in wanting to just go into your cave and do it on your own, and you can leave ready to communicate and get in front of people and rehearse all that. And that's sorry?
When you're nervous, just write a script.
Yes, when you're nervous, write a script, which we kind of all did today, actually. We shared some questions before. So just before we finish, are there any burning questions? Anybody got a final question? They're like, yes, woman at the back there. Right at the back. Can you... So for those of you that didn't quite hear the question, did you have a memorable class is broadly what the question was.
I already made reference to that earlier. I had figure drawing every semester the whole time I was here. And we had model after model. I knew all the models. I knew all the positions. I knew all the poses. It was just like an unending world of figure drawing. And I knew that like you said, practice makes perfect. And now I do figures in my job every day, and I have looked at so many figures. I look at figures that I create, which is the coolest thing in the world, that I get to have a project every day, a new one. And it's a little less predictable than when I was in the art school because there's other factors involved in it, but it is still life drawing for me. Same thing.
Graphic design 101, bar none for me. It was the first time I had to deal with constraint. So here's a piece of paper and 3 black dots. Communicate, dance. All right. You know, that kind of thing really breaks you out of the sort of notion of, given all the crippling choice that you have when you're just given a set of paint and a blank canvas. What am I going to make? What do I want to say? When you're handed a project like in a graphic design class and given so many parameters and limitations with which to accomplish something, it really makes you think harder and more abstractly and creatively about how you're going to do that thing. And it kind of breaks you later from a lot of those constraints. And so now often I'm more comforted when I'm given less to work with.
Frank Lloyd Wright always said, limitations are a designer's best friend. So to that. But for me, it was industrial design class. You know, it was you open up the box and like, what's the new project? That was always kind of like the beginning of the thought process of what is the idea, what is the product I'm gonna create that is unique to me, that solves problems that, I think I was always a problem solver, so having a new problem to solve was always an exciting moment.
Chelsey.
I don't have one class. I think it was all about the critiques. But I do hear that there is a class about finances or back of house, how to run your studio, just life skills that most of the kids aren't taking, even though it's available. So take it. You need it. You need it.
Thank you all so much. Please, let's give our speakers a round of applause. Thank you.
Now we're going to go critique this panel.
Yeah.
Students want to talk to them.
If any of the students or anyone is interested in talking to the panelists, I'm sure they're open to questions, individual questions too.